Everybody? There you go.
Yep.
Okay. So
Okay.
Consul Ricarte Abejuela, Consul Bucci, please go ahead for your presentation and we'll get the things started this evening. Go ahead.
Okay. So like Joyce said, I prepared a few slides. It's just 11 slides, don't worry. And it's going to tackle about generally what dual citizenship is, what law it's based on, what the common requirements are. And then after that, we go straight to Q&A because that is really where most of the participants here, I guess, would be most interested in. Okay, so I will just be sharing my screen. And I will begin my presentation. Okay, so for this afternoon, it's a short chat about dual citizenship. Now, in the Philippines, we have several ways of how you can acquire Philippine citizenship. The one is by naturalization. Another is by direct act of Congress, meaning that Congress will create a special law just for you, granting you Philippine citizenship. And we have by reacquisition or retention. For today's presentation, I'll focus on the third because this is the most applicable for nearly all former Filipinos here in the United States. Now, the relevant laws on reacquisition, we actually have three. The oldest is Commonwealth Act number 63 of 1936. So as early as 1936, people already could reacquire Philippine citizenship. Then we have Republic Act number 8171 of 1995. And of course, we have Republic Act number 9225 of 2003. So Republic Act 9225 is the most applicable for all of you. Commonwealth Act number 63 is the only thing that differentiates it would be that it's more for Filipinos who were soldiers and deserted the military. So of course, since this was drafted in 1936, it was wartime, so that was understandable. For RA 8171 of 1995, this is for females who lost their Philippine citizenship when they married a foreigner and the loss of the husband's country granted them the foreign citizenship. And you have, of course, RA 9225, which I will discuss in particular. So Republic Act number 9225 is the Citizenship Retention and Reacquisition Act of 2003, or more commonly known as the Dual Citizenship Law. And it declares that natural-born Filipinos, natural-born citizens of the Philippines who were naturalized at another country shall be deemed not to have lost their Philippine citizenship. So this is the spirit behind the law. Now, for those to reacquire or retain Philippine citizenship, the former natural-born citizen needs to take an oath of allegiance to the Republic. So it's not just a matter of signing documents and submitting it, having the documents approved. There has to be an actual taking of an oath. And I think all of you who were naturalized as Americans underwent the same process. You had to take the oath of allegiance. Now, this law also provides that the minor children shall likewise be deemed citizens of the Philippines. Now, there are several important points about this particular law, so I will not discuss the law in detail, but I will just highlight several important points that you all should be aware of if you're interested or you know of people who are interested to reacquire Philippine citizenship through this law. First, it only applies to former natural-born Philippine citizens. Now, this is quite specific in the law. For what does it mean for you to be natural-born? It means that when you were born, your parents were Philippine citizens, or at least one parent was a Philippine citizen. If you were born when both parents are no longer Philippine citizens, you are not considered natural-born. If you were a foreigner and you acquired Philippine citizenship by virtue of naturalization, you are a naturalized Philippine citizen. You are not natural-born. So that's the very important distinction. Again, it requires taking the oath of allegiance. For dependent children, the law does not distinguish if they are legitimate, illegitimate, or adopted. Okay, so if you have minor children and you include them in your petition, whether that child is legitimate, illegitimate, or adopted, once your petition has been approved and they were included in the petition, they are also considered included and will be recognized as dual citizens. So we had a very specific case before in Chicago. I remember this very clearly because I administered the oath to this principal. She had two children. One was her kid, biological, and the other was adopted. And it was an American kid, meaning the child was adopted here in the US. Parents of the adopted child were, the biological parents were American, but she included him in her petition because the kid was still a minor and he was deemed a dual citizen. Okay. Those seeking elective or appointive public office in the Philippines must renounce their US citizenship. So if a retiree plans to reacquire Philippine citizenship and takes the oath and eventually plans to run for public office either at the barangay or city level, then they have to renounce their US citizenship. Appointive position is still the same. So if you have a very good friend at the Department of Labor, for example, and he wants to appoint you as a director or an undersecretary, then you have to renounce your US citizenship, because when it comes to public service in the Philippines, you can only have Philippine citizenship. You cannot serve public office as a dual citizen. Also, if you are a member of the military here in the US, yes, you can be granted dual citizenship as long as your security clearance allows it, but your right to vote is not extended to you if you are still in active military service. That's part of the law. And one thing, it's not permanent. It's not fixed. Even if you have reacquired Philippine citizenship through RA 9225, there is a possibility that this can be canceled or you may even actually lose it. One very common example of people losing it, a Filipino born in the Philippines migrated to another country, not the US, like Canada, for example. Then when in Canada, that person gained Canadian citizenship. After gaining Canadian citizenship, that person availed of RA 9225 and became a dual citizen of both the Philippines and Canada. Then because of work, they had to transfer to the US, and eventually that person was naturalized as a US citizen. The moment that person was naturalized as a US citizen, he also lost his Philippine citizenship. Okay? Then if he wants to be a Philippine citizen again, then he has to apply once more for dual citizenship. It's not common, but it happens. I've seen 3 actual cases. Now the important part, what exactly are the core requirements? Remember, core meaning the most basic. What does this mean? Depending on your particular case or scenario, additional requirements may be asked of you. So do not be surprised if suddenly there will be an additional document that you need to provide. But these are the most basic. The first is, of course, an appointment. Ever since the pandemic, New York PCG has instituted an appointment system. And for those of you who have commented that you cannot get an appointment, well, this is the schedule that you need to know. If you want to avail of an appointment for dual citizenship, visit our website every Sunday and Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. This is when we release the appointment slots. So if you cannot get one on Sunday night, then try again on Wednesday night and try again the next Sunday and so on and so forth at 9 p.m. Okay? Please share this with your friends because not many people know this. An accomplished form. The form is downloadable from our website. You need to accomplish the form with the exception of the signature, because you must sign the form here at the consulate in front of a consular officer. Okay? And the form, of course, requires 2x2 photographs with a white background. So please do not forget that, because a lot of people come here and they don't even have pictures with them. So remember, it is only for passports that we take the pictures. But for dual citizenship, you have to provide your own pictures. The next requirement is, of course, your PSA birth certificate. So this is the birth certificate that you should get from the Philippine Statistics Authority. This is how it looks like. So it is on security paper and it has the logo of the Philippine Statistics Authority and the signature of the National Statistician and the Civil Registrar General. Now, if you have a document on security paper, but the logo is the NSO, the National Statistics Office, we will still accept it. Because the PSA used to be the NSO. Okay? What is important? It is from the PSA, it is on security paper, it has the logo of the PSA and the signature of the National Statistician. If you do not have one, you can order one and you can do it online. You do not have to physically go to the Philippines to get this. So you can go to the website of the Philippine Statistics Authority and you can order a copy of your birth certificate and they will send it to you and you should receive it in less than a month. For women who are married and who adopted the surname of the husband, then you have to also provide a PSA copy of your marriage certificate. Again, this is only applicable for women who got married and are using the surname of the husband. If you did not use the surname of your husband, then this is not really that necessary. Because the reason why you have to produce is your married name is different from your maiden name. And this document will link your identity between you and your birth certificate. You also will have to produce your Philippine and US passports. The Philippine passport, if you have it, okay? And the US passport, if you have it. Now, most applicants have both. Some only have the US passport because they were naturalized so long ago, they actually lost their Philippine passport. And of course, your US naturalization certificate, because remember, the law is only for those who are naturalized. So you have to produce proof that you were naturalized as a US citizen, and that is your certificate of naturalization. Now remember, you have to bring the originals and their photocopies. We at the consulate will not collect the originals. We will only collect the photocopies, but we have to see the original documents. So please do not bring photocopies only. Please do not show us your mobile phone with pictures of your documents. No, we need to see the originals, and this is again required by Philippine law. And of course, payment. For adults or the principal applicant, it's $50 per petition. So if it's you and your husband, then that's $100. Now, if you have dependents, meaning minor children, and you want to include them in your petition, each child is $25. So if you will apply and you have 3 minor children, then that's what? $125. So that's $50 for you and $25 each for your 3 children. Okay? Now, like I said, other documents may be necessary on a case-to-case basis. I really cannot enumerate all documents unless I know of the situations of your particular case. So what I suggest for those of you whose cases are not the usual, please visit our website. Believe it or not, most of the documentary requirements are listed on our website. The form is on our website. It is downloadable and it's a fillable form. So you can just type. You don't have to answer it, with your handwriting. And it's all there. If it's not there, then that's the only time you contact us by email. Okay? So all cases are there. What if you are divorced? What if you were adopted? What if you were naturalized as a child? And so on and so forth. Everything is on our website. Believe it or not, it's there. Now let's talk about dependents, because there are some principals who have dependents. Again, they should be minor children. There have been cases of people who petitioned for dual citizenship, but their child is already above 17. That is already an adult. You cannot include your child as a dependent when they are 18 years old or older. Okay? So your dependents should be minor children, meaning 17 years old or younger. They must be included in the petition of the principal. A minor child cannot petition by himself or herself. So if you wish to petition and you have minor children, please include them now. Because if you don't, and if they were born when you were already American citizens and they become adults, they are no longer eligible to reacquire Philippine citizenship through this particular law. And that is a lost opportunity. Okay? Anyway, if ever, they can always renounce their Philippine citizenship later. It's easier to renounce than to acquire. Should include support documents. So the core documents for dependent children are very similar to that of the principal. We need their birth certificate. We need their certificate of citizenship. We need their photographs. Okay? So without those, we cannot process it. The good news is, unlike adult applicants, children do not need to be present. They don't have to be with you when you come to the consulate to file your petition. So all we need are their documents, and you, the principal, must be here in person because the children do not take the oath. So that is why they do not need to be here at the consulate physically. Now, some children may actually be dual citizens by birth. So if that is the case, you do not need to include them as dependents in your petition. Okay? So I would like to talk about this in a little bit more detail because a lot of times that whenever we evaluate documents, we notice that a lot of minor children that some Filipinos include in their petitions actually are already dual citizens by birth. Now, what do we mean by a child being a dual citizen by birth? These are children who were born in the United States when at least one parent was still a Philippine citizen. Why? Well, because by virtue of US law, if you are born in the US, you are a US citizen. That is US law. According to Philippine law, you are a Philippine citizen if at the time of your birth, at least one person is a Philippine citizen. And it does not matter where you were born. Okay? So if a child was born in the US when at least one parent is a Philippine citizen, then by virtue of both Philippine and US laws, that child is a citizen of both countries. Hence, a dual citizen by birth. So they do not need to be included in the petition. What you need to do, if you have not done yet, is to please report it to the consulate, which has jurisdiction over the state where the child was born. So if the child was born in New York State or New Jersey or any other state under the jurisdiction of the Philippine consulate in New York, then you simply have to file a report of birth to the Philippine consulate here in New York. Okay? And please visit this particular website for all the documentary requirements, the downloadable form, and the instructions and how to report the birth. And another good thing, to report a birth of a Filipino abroad, you do not have to physically submit it here at the consulate. It can be submitted by mail. Okay? So you don't have to come here. Just send your documents with the payment and a return envelope. We'll process it. If all documents are in order, then we send it back to you. That's the gist. That's the basic. Now for the fun part. What are your questions? But if you visit our website and there is something not included in the website or something you are not clear about, then please send us an email. Don't call us because we cannot guarantee we can answer the phone. But we do guarantee we will answer your email because we check emails twice a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. So we check it when we arrive and before we leave. And we guarantee you 24 to 48 hours, we will respond to your emails. And there is a website where you can find all information, all instructions, all forms, everything you need to do to successfully submit your petition. And it's right there on the site. Okay. So with that, I turn it back over to Joyce.
Okay.
And let's hear your questions.
Okay, thanks, Consul Bucci. If you can stop sharing your screen, and there we go. I want to just welcome again. We had a lot more people who are on the line right now. Thank you so much for joining. And I hope that the presentation was really, really important for you to have seen because really gave all the detailed steps necessary. If you would like to ask a question, please use your underneath the reaction button on your screen if you have a laptop. There is a raise hand function. So you can see my hand is raised right on the left side of the screen. You can also type your questions in the chat. It's also possible to do that. I'll be happy to read it for you. So as I see your hands raise up, I will call on you and I'll give you the floor. All right, first question is from Vivian Velasco. Go ahead, please. You may unmute, please. Vivian, go ahead. Okay, I guess she's not yet able to unmute. Anybody else have a question? This is the time. We have Consul Bucci here with us. You can ask any relevant questions right now. Okay, no questions yet. All right. Maybe one thing I probably would like to ask Consul Bucci is before they start their process, would it be how can they ascertain that they need to report the births or marriages of their families? Like for myself, I went to the consulate and luckily I had all my documents, but there was one document I did not realize I had to bring because I didn't read that part of the FAQs on the website. Would it be more advantageous for them to report those births and marriages first before they embark on the dual citizenship?
Good question. And the answer there, honestly, is it depends. It depends on the circumstances of the birth. It depends on the circumstances of the marriage. Now, per Philippine law, if you are married when you were still a Philippine citizen, it is your obligation to report it. But not all people do that. Okay, and in certain instances, a Philippine citizen got married here in the US, eventually got divorced, became a US citizen, and now wants to reacquire. The question, should they report the marriage? Technically speaking, yes, because you were married when you were still a Philippine citizen. But honestly speaking, it would be quite difficult because, well, the marriage is already dissolved based on US law. It was already divorced. So how I interpret situations such as this is no harm, no foul. Okay, you don't have to report it if you don't want to. Because if you will report it, then you will also have to have your divorce legally recognized by the Philippines. And that is an added burden on the applicant. And usually, I wish to avoid having more burden given on the applicant. Now, with regards to the child, if the child was born in the Philippines, then there is no need to report any births because there is already a record in Philippine database about the child being born in the Philippines. Now, if the child was born in the US, again, the question is, when the child was born, was at least one parent still a Philippine citizen? If the answer is yes, then you should report the birth. If the answer is no, meaning if the child was born when both parents were already US citizens, then you can only report the birth after your petition for dual citizenship has been approved. And the reason now is so that the child will have a file in the Philippine Statistics Authority of the details of his birth. And you can only do that after the dual petition has been approved. Because if you do not report the birth, what would happen is when the child grows up, they have a document showing dual citizenship in the records of the Philippine database, but they do not have any documents about the circumstances of the birth. So simply to avoid any problems in the future, it is best to report the birth.
Okay, great, thank you. We have a question from the chat. It says, Abby actually has asked, what is the processing time usually for reporting a birth of a Filipino abroad? Because she plans to report her birth in the US to the Los Angeles consulate. Should I wait before making that appointment in New York? And can you tell us why would there be the need to report to LA versus New York because of where the person was born? Is that the case?
Yeah, chances are the child was born in a state under the jurisdiction of the consulate in Los Angeles. So that's usually Southern California, Nevada, New Mexico, and I don't actually know all the states under the jurisdiction of LA, but chances are, yes, the child was born under their jurisdiction. Now, how long would it take? I cannot speak for Los Angeles, but for New York, it takes 2 weeks. Because each particular consulate has a different manpower complement. They have different volumes of applications that they receive. So I'm sorry, I cannot speak for LA. But for New York, we usually have a turnaround time of 1 to 2 weeks. Third question, should I wait for that before making an appointment in New York? No. They are 2 separate procedures. You don't have to wait for that because we don't need that for you to reacquire Philippine citizenship.
And we're going to go back to Vivian. Vivian will be asking her question. She'll be typing it because she's having audio issues right now. I think I'll also bring up a situation. This is my personal situation. I was married as an American citizen. I got divorced as an American citizen. And I got my marriage annulled as an American citizen before I embarked on dual citizenship. So when I asked Consul Bucci at the time, I said, do I need to report the marriage? And as he mentioned earlier, technically I do not, because when all that happened, I was American. And if I then wanted to pursue getting a passport later on, I will have to check in the appropriate box. But there was a box for divorce versus annulled versus single or whatever it was. And I think I have to select the appropriate box, which is annulled, because that means in the Philippine records, the annulled marriage means I was technically never married when I became a Filipino, correct? Is that the right interpretation?
Well, like I said, if your marriage was never reported, then we have no record of it. So you can choose either married, either divorced. Okay, whichever category is more comfortable or more convenient for you.
Great, great. But yes, as Consul Bucci mentioned, I did have to secure the birth certificate on that special paper. It took me a month to get, and it cost me a ton of money because besides the cost of the piece of paper, there was the delivery cost, which is by FedEx. So I think I got 2 copies. It cost me $75. So just as an FYI. I also had to bring yes, as he mentioned, I did my form beforehand. I do not have my Philippine passport. I had my US passport, my naturalization. But because of my personal situation, I had to bring my marriage certificate from the city of New York. I brought my divorce decree from the state of New York, and I brought my annulment degree from the Archbishop's office tribunal of New York. So I had to bring those extra things because those are special for me. It's different for others.
Yeah. Now, just to explain, Joyce, while we are waiting for Vivian to type her question, the reason why we ask all of these documents, everything actually has a reason. And allow me around 5 minutes to discuss this. And we call it the identity chain. The identity chain, like any chain, is only as strong as its weakest link. Now, the core requirement is your birth certificate and your naturalization certificate, right? Now, from the time you were born till the time you were naturalized, several things could have occurred. And one major event is, of course, marriage and or dissolution of marriage. And another reason why we ask for your passport is because the passport is your identification, your form of identification. Because your birth certificate does not have your photograph. Your naturalization certificate does, but oftentimes the name on the naturalization certificate is already different, probably because you got married and you adopted the surname of your husband, or as a lot of Filipinos do, they avail of the free opportunity to legally change your name, right? So how then can we link your naturalization certificate with your birth certificate? How do you know that it's one and the same person? So that's where your marriage certificate would come in. That's where your passport or IDs would come in. Okay? So everything has a reason behind it. It's not simply because gusto namin kayong pahirapan, which is a very common accusation, which is totally untrue.
Okay, next question. Vivian has finally written her very long question. Basically, it really deals with the fact that they were going to do their dual citizenship by 2020, but because he forgot his passport, they could not proceed. Her son then moved to Los Angeles. He's now 30, so he's above the threshold for being reported as a child. But he is now dual citizen by birth because I guess she was a Filipino at the time, of his birth. So the question is, because he's now 30, and she, as the parent, does she need to report him and how does he proceed then? So the chat box has the entire story.
Well, because based on your statement here, your son was born when you were still a Philippine citizen, then all you have to do is have the birth reported. And it can be done either by you as the mother or the child himself. The only time a child cannot report his own birth is when the child is still a minor. But if the child is already an adult, the child can report his own birth. And also I have seen instances of adults who had to report their own births because the mother was already deceased or the parents were deceased. So obviously the parents could not file the report. So as long as the child is an adult, the child can file his own report. And again, I will share here in the chat the website for how to report a birth. Okay, so because the child of Vivian was born here in New York, then that falls under our jurisdiction.
Thank you for that, Lee. And related to that, Suzalyn Liana also asked, if my American citizen son is already above 18, can I still be the one to apply dual citizenship for him?
No, only if the child is already an adult and the child qualifies based on the requirements, he has to apply on his own. So remember, you can only apply for your child if the child is still a minor, menor de edad, 17 and below. Once the child is 18, the child has to apply on his own.
Great, thank you. One of the questions that was asked of me beforehand was, what are some of the benefits of dual citizenships? I know you mentioned earlier, you mentioned about if you wanted to run for office or a friend was going to appoint you to a position, that's one of the reasons why you should become a dual. But what are the other good reasons for why we should consider becoming a dual citizen?
Well, I've been handling dual citizenship for what, 10 years now. And based on my interactions with a lot of former Filipinos who have availed of this privilege, they fall under three major categories, 3 or 4, but I'll stick to the top 3. Number 1, they want to purchase land because purchase of land is limited to Philippine citizens. For foreigners, they can purchase a condo unit. That's it. But they cannot purchase land. They can inherit land from their parents, but that's it. That's all you can do. You cannot purchase land. So that's one major reason. Second, they want to retire in the Philippines. And as a former Filipino under the balikbayan privilege, you are allowed only up to 1 year in the Philippines. Beyond that, you will be overstaying. And for every day beyond the approved stay, you will be fined by the Bureau of Immigration. So that's another reason why a lot prefer to become dual citizens, because once you are a dual citizen, there is no such limit anymore. You can stay as long as you want. The third major reason I've encountered is for the benefit of the children. They want their children to study in the Philippines for university. And in the Philippines, if you are not a Philippine citizen, the number of universities you can enroll in is limited. And not only that, you will have to pay as a foreigner. So unlike if you're a Philippine citizen, you can study anywhere and you pay the same tuition as all Philippine citizens. In fact, for state universities and colleges, it's now tuition free. But if you're an American, you can only enroll in universities accredited by the CHED, and you will have to pay as a foreign student. So that's the third. And the fourth is, well, they want to work there. They want to practice their profession in the Philippines. Now for benefits, well, you are all Philippine citizens. So all benefits you used to enjoy as a Philippine citizen, you will enjoy again if you are a dual citizen. The only disadvantage I see, at least based on my interactions with applicants, is number one, taxation. Philippine law will only tax you for income earned in the Philippines. If you earn here in the US, we won't touch that. The IRS, on the other hand, will tax you even if you are on the moon. Okay, and the second disadvantage is, of course, you cannot run for public office. You cannot be appointed in government service if you are dual citizen. Aside from that, honestly, I do not see any disadvantage for reacquiring Philippine citizenship. If you can think of one, please share with me so I can study it.
But yes, you're absolutely right about that. I actually went to school in the Philippines for graduate studies, and I did pay the foreigner's fee because I was a U.S. passport holder at the time. So you're correct in that. So that's something that maybe the parents on the call can consider, especially those who want to send their kids to med school. You know, med school here costs. I mean, I work at the College of Dentistry. Our tuition here is $90,000 a year. You might be able to go to a great dental school, med school in the Philippines for a fraction of the cost. And that will also give you as best education as what you can get here. Are there any other questions from?
Yeah, 90,000 a year is 4.5 million pesos.
Correct.
So you can enroll in the Philippines and have that pays for your tuition, your apartment, your living expenses, and you still get change.
There you go. Absolutely right. Okay, I'm going to turn the floor over now to Grace Blasser, who is my colleague here at the College of Dentistry. Grace, please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much. First, Jocelyn, thank you for facilitating, and Consulate, thank you for having this presentation. I might have missed the beginning part. I know I came in a little bit late. So my situation is I was born in the Philippines. I am now a US citizen. Does that mean that I am still a Filipino citizen, or do I need to reapply?
You were naturalized as a US citizen?
Yes.
Then by virtue of Philippine law, you are no longer a Philippine citizen.
Understood. Okay.
So if you wish to do so, you can definitely petition to reacquire your Philippine citizenship.
Thank you. Because I was listening to Jocelyn, had a great question, right? I might be acquiring and inheriting some land from my my auntie there, and we were not sure whether that is allowed if I am not a Philippine citizen. But it sounds like if I'm inheriting, it's not necessary to be a citizen, right? Is that right?
Yes, Philippine law does allow foreigners, especially former Filipinos, to acquire land by inheritance.
Okay, so that's clear. Not that I will not be. I do want to have my dual citizen, but it was just a question. Thank you very much.
Okay, no problem. Now, as to another common question I get is, should I reacquire Philippine citizenship? Well, reacquisition of Philippine citizenship is a personal choice. Of course, as a member of the Philippine government, we encourage former Filipinos to reacquire Philippine citizenship, but we will not force you because each person's circumstances are different. Okay, so like for example, if your employment does not allow you to reacquire Philippine citizenship because of security clearance, like you work for the federal government, so on and so forth, then you don't have to. Okay, but it is something we hope you will consider down the road.
Consul Bucci, I have a question that also relates to one of the benefits that wasn't mentioned earlier. We just had an election process, and being a dual citizenship will allow me now the option to vote, correct? So
Yeah,
in that,
that's correct.
yes. So in that case, when we are interested then, once you do complete the dual citizenship, what is the natural process to apply for the overseas voter?
Well, overseas vote, Philippine elections, national elections occur every 3 years. So that means this year's national elections, so the next one is in 2025. That's for the senatorial elections. And next would be 2028 for presidential and senatorial elections and so on and so forth every 3 years. Now, once you lost your Philippine citizenship when you were naturalized as an American, then of course, you also lost the right to vote. Now, once you reacquire Philippine citizenship, what you need to do is to once again register as a Philippine voter. Now, the registration period for overseas voters is usually 1 year prior to an election year. So that means if the next cycle of overseas voting is in 2025, then the registration for overseas voters will start in 2024. So this year, next year, there is no registration that will be happening. But in 2024, there will be. So then you can register as overseas voters so you can participate in the 2025 and all future overseas elections of the Republic of the Philippines.
Great. What about the case of passports? I know I actually asked that to you personally and say, do I need a passport to travel to the Philippines?
For dual citizens, the possession of a Philippine passport is actually optional because the Philippine passport is a travel document, and that purpose is also served by your American passport. Now, if you already possess a valid US passport, honestly, you really don't need a Philippine passport when traveling to the Philippines. What you do need are your dual citizenship documents. And why is that? Allow me to explain. When you enter the Philippines and when you exit the Philippines, in order for you not to be treated as a foreigner by Philippine immigration authorities, you produce your dual citizenship documents. Now, if you have a Philippine passport and you travel back to the US, immigration will ask for two things. One, where is your visa? Of course, that does not apply to you. Then they will ask, where is your green card? Again, that will not apply to you. What they're asking for is the legal basis of your long-term stay in the US. So if you say, I am a dual citizen, what's your proof? That's your identification certificate. So even if you possess a Philippine passport and you present it together with your US passport, they will still look for your identification certificate. So between the Philippine passport and identification certificate, again, you really don't need a Philippine passport.
Great. How about in the case of when we live here in America, we have an ID that we use to prove who we are. Most likely it's our driver's license. In the Philippines, what kind of for dual citizenship, what kind of ID are we going to show them? I'm not going to flash my dual citizenship paper because I'm going to keep that safe somewhere.
Yep.
What do people show for ID?
Well, right now, the Philippine passport is the best form of identification, but we are currently proceeding with the national ID. So the Philippines has launched the national ID 2 years ago, and currently registration is focused in the Philippines, but eventually it will also be done overseas. Now, what I suggest is you have two options. Number one, when you travel to the Philippines and you have a chance, apply for a national ID while you are still in the Philippines. Or option two, wait for it until it is offered here in the United States. And of course, option 3, if you really need an ID, then a Philippine passport is, of course, one of the highest respected and accepted forms of identification in the Philippines. But personally, I'd recommend that you go for the national ID.
That sounds like a plan. Okay. Anybody else have a question? Well, Vivian did have a question asked on behalf of other people. I don't know if you'd like to address that now, Consul Buchi.
Yeah, in times of war, it says here the U.S. government, in times of war in the Philippines or other countries, if caught outside the U.S. government can rescue a dual citizen back to the U.S. Well, you are a U.S. citizen, so I cannot speak for the U.S. government. You'll have to check with the U.S. government. But if you are a Philippine citizen overseas, the Philippine government will always come to your rescue, come to your aid. Now, I think it's the same for the U.S. government, but I cannot speak about it with authority because I do not represent the U.S. government.
That's a good point to make. And I actually have a friend who used to work at the State Department in the U.S. For some of us, the JCs, we actually met him yesterday, Derek Kelly. So I will ask him and get back to all of you folks who were concerned about that issue. Anything else? Oh, yes. Next question. Can a dual citizenship can acquire properties from ex-husband who is now deceased? Ooh.
Properties in the Philippines? If properties in the Philippines, yes. Because as a dual citizen, you have reacquired all the rights of a Philippine citizen, which includes the right to purchase land, the right to purchase property.
And it doesn't matter if you're related to the original landowner or not.
No, as long as all documents are in order and you can afford it, that's the only limit. It's can you afford it? But if you can, then if all documents are in order, of course, you can purchase land. You can purchase even from your siblings, which is quite common actually.
I'm going to ask Grace Blesser once again for her question. Go ahead, Grace.
So I have a US passport. What benefits would there be to having a Philippine passport? And just going by the discussion we just, I just heard about having a Philippine passport may not be necessary, but what would the benefits be?
Believe it or not, there are some countries in the world that would recognize a Philippine passport and not a US passport. If you want to go to Brazil, for example, to experience Carnival in Rio, a US passport, I think you require a visa to enter Brazil. A Philippine passport, you can enter visa-free for 30 days. So there you go. Another is countries in Southeast Asia. A lot of them would allow visa-free entry for up to 30 days for Philippine passport holders, like Indonesia, for example. So if you want to go to Bali, as a US passport holder, you have to have an Indonesian visa. But as a Philippine passport holder, you're visa-free for up to 3 weeks or 1 month, and so on and so forth. So yeah, those are some of the benefits of having a Philippine passport.
Thank you very much. I love to travel, and that's very interesting to hear. Thank you.
That's also good to hear, Consul Buchi. I'm actually going to Bali at the end of August. I'm going to need to get a visa to stay there for a few weeks.
Yeah,
So
but with a Philippine passport, you're visa-free.
I need to get my passport too, then. Okay, any other questions? Anything else? I think the question from Suzalyn says, even if you're divorced, I think it doesn't matter, no? It doesn't matter if you're married, divorced, whoever owns the property, if you can buy it as a dual citizen, you can buy the property.
Yep.
It doesn't matter who owns it. All right, we have time for maybe one last question. Anybody else in the audience? Okay, probably not. I think this has really been really helpful. If they have other questions, can they send their questions to an email address perhaps? That might be
Yep,
easier for them?
I typed it earlier on in the chat, but I can retype it. It's newyorkpcg at dual.gov.ph, but I will retype it just so that it's not buried in the chat.
Great. And while you're doing
There
that,
you go.
Perfect. Okay. So we are at the end of our Q&A portion at 6:56. I hope everybody had a really wonderful time to just listen to the basics and get your questions answered directly from Consul Bucci. And you have the resources that he has included, including an email for any particulars that you may have. Our session today is also recorded, so I'll be happy to share it if you so request it from me. Or if you're from one of the other groups like Pakal, you can ask it through Ria Serrano. The JCs, obviously, you can ask it to me directly. And Consul Bucci, your PowerPoint, you can share that out as well to me, and I can pass it along to whoever's interested.
Well, it's in the recording, so.
Oh, yeah. No, but if we can get a separate file, we can also post it in the invitation that I sent out.
What I will share with you is the link to the dual citizenship website of the consulate. It's actually more complete. Now, I do have one request, Joyce, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm going to type now in the chat the link to the website of the Philippine Consulate specifically for dual citizenship. Please visit the website. And any comments you have about the website, whether the information is clear, the information is lacking, any or all comments you have about it, send it to me so I can have the website improved. Because unless we get feedback, we will assume everything is good. We will never know if you tell us if it requires some improvement. So please, the website link is there. And I will type my email address so you can send the email directly to me. Because the email I shared earlier is for the dual citizenship section. What I will share now is my own personal email, which I hope you won't abuse. There you go.
All right. That's a really great thing to share, Consul Bucci. Exactly. Let's really use it for official requests or something that's particular to your family circumstances. But other than that, I think I also read that website top to bottom. It was just the last minute that I may have forgotten a few things. Be patient. The appointment system might take a little getting used to. When I first applied for it, the dual citizenship portion was very easy. The slots opened up exactly 9:05. I was on the system. But you're right. If you can't get it that Sunday, check again the following Wednesday or the following Sunday. I think the last question that somebody asked was, can you apply for your passport the same day that you do dual?
Unfortunately, you cannot because the passport requires a totally separate appointment.
There you go.
Now, there was one particular instance of an applicant who was very forward thinking. What he did was he applied for an appointment for passport on the same afternoon as his dual appointment. So his dual appointment was in the morning, his passport appointment was in the afternoon. So he was able to apply for his passport on the same day.
If you're lucky to get that slot.
Yes, if you're lucky to get both.
Yeah.
Because the appointment link for passport is different from that for dual citizenship. So probably what he did was open both sites at the same time and apply for both at the same time.
Right. That's very useful information. And yes, once you do apply for it, as I shared from my experience, I got an email confirmation. I also got a text confirmation telling me, oh, your appointment is about 20 minutes away. Please get ready. And if you need more time, please say you need more time. So there is a system of communication with you as the applicant. And if you need to cancel for any reason, please do. I think the one thing here also is if you cannot keep your appointment, please
cancel so it can be used by other people.
Right, exactly. Remember, we're not the only people in the state of New York that need the services. The consulate handles up to what, 10 states? Is that it?
10 states, yep, that's
10
right.
States. So let's give the slot up if we know you are unable to make it.
And again, a friendly reminder, if you do plan to petition for reacquisition of Philippine citizenship, visit our website. Everything is there because believe it or not, some of our former countrymen, when they come to the consulate, they don't even have the form with them. So if you have everything with you, I guarantee you're in and out in processing in 15 minutes, 20 minutes max. Then you just come back later on in the day for your oath taking. So there's no need for you to, oh, I forgot pictures. So you have to leave and go to Walgreens or Duan Reed to take your photos. Oh, I forgot this, I forgot that. And sayang yung oras.
Okay. All right. I guess we have come to the end of our session. Thank you very much.